Last time, I showed you how I planned, assembled, and primed my first diorama. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how I painted the entire scene and whether or not it placed at the 2-scale model events I took it to. The war zone that our story takes place in is one made of Durasteel and Duracrete, the latter of which has already been painted, which is why I focused my energy on making all the Durasteel stand out with a vibrant steel highlight. I took great satisfaction in applying dabs of bright silver to individual studs on the wall and smearing it on the roughly broken floor panels amongst my composition, and immediately I was thrilled with how it looked. Before long, it was time to turn my attention to the terrain details. I wanted to stick with metallics for now and pulled out a bright gold for the imperial embellishments throughout the diorama. The Aquillas, filigree, and skulls. And oh my, were there a lot of skulls to paint. I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised, as it is the Imperium's favorite decorative embellishment, but still, I was surprised as I searched for all of them. After that, I wanted to bring in more color, so I began with green to represent Cadia on the crates of supplies the Guardsmen had scattered around them. But was any of it useful? That's the real question. The barrel of fuel, of course, was painted a bright red, as a warning to everyone that it was highly flammable and would explode if shot. Probably not something that will help my boys directly, but if the apothecary servitor aiding them needs refueling, they will be covered. I had scattered a number of sandbags around the scene to imply that there might have been some fortifications in place to help protect the Imperial forces in the area, but it had since been abandoned and fallen into disuse. Once all the base colors had dried, it was time to weather everything a bit and make the scene appear like the conflict had been going on for a while. Which means a thorough dry brushing to make it appear like paint has chipped and rubbed off through use all along the edges of the crates and barrels. I finished with a heavy wash over everything because it wasn't grimdark enough for me. The building and other scattered human-made objects I used a black wash on, whereas the ground and the crumbled Duracrete, I pulled out a brown wash to help differentiate it from everything else. At this point, I was feeling extremely pleased with how the base had turned out, and now I could fully focus on the characters and what had happened to them. Who were my characters? Well, they would be 2 steadfast guardsmen hailing from Cadia and the apothecary servitor they found during their last battle. I primed the 3 characters exactly as I did the environment and used a lot of the same hues on the 2 guardsmen as I had on the base as well. So while I work on that, let me actually introduce you to Corporal Jens, the unfortunate man with not only a mangled elbow, but a rather nasty belly wound that has concerned the man that is trying to call in and save his NCO's life, Trooper Dansk. In my head, these 2 enlisted at the same time, became best friends in basic, and have had each other's backs ever since. Which is why Dansk is using every possible avenue he can to help his old buddy Jens survive. He's trying to box in for help. If he could just get a hold of an apothecary who could tell him which syringe in the medkit they found is the right one to use, but he's had no such luck. The interference from the enemy is just too much. As I moved to paint the men's flesh tone, I made an effort to make Jens's skin a lot paler and more drained than Trooper Dansk's, as his 2 injuries would absolutely be taking their toll on him at this point in their battle. Jens was covered in blood from his injuries. Smeared blood was soaking the wrap around his injured elbow. His face took a beating when he fell from the bullet that punctured his gut that was also still bleeding out. Hopefully, Jens wouldn't be suffering much longer though, because Dansk, thank the Emperor, had found an apothecary servitor seemingly lost on the battlefield. The trooper hoped it being alone didn't mean the apothecary it traveled with had met his end. However, the little vehicle's mechanical red eye flashes in the human skull it was fused to, as if in confirmation, before it turned and rolled away. Had the machine's spirit understood him? Dansk put a hand on his friends. He had to trust in the Emperor that it did, and that Jens would live. Hey guys, I'm just jumping into the video to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because I know most of you aren't. If you're into the spicier side of the content, then you should join my VIP page. New members get 50% off their first month subscription, and I really hope to see you there. Now, let's go ahead and get back to the video. Now that you know their story and the figures and accessories have all been painted, it's time to glue everybody down and make the story I just told you a permanent moment captured in my diorama. Alongside the 3 main characters of the story, I had also painted up a number of scatter terrain to help add to the scene. the aforementioned doctor's bag and a smaller jerry can for refueling, and even a loose helmet that I imagined had been Jen's before it flew off his head when he fell from being shot. Because of my previous planning and the strong narrative I have formed for the scene, figuring out the best spots for each painted piece did not take me long. And after a short dry time later, the only thing I had left to do was paint the rim of the base in black and bring it to my IPMS meeting to see how it would do in the May Day Mayhem competition. So, Angela, you might be wondering, how did your diorama do at the May Day Mayhem event at your local IPMS meeting? Well, I am extremely happy to report that my little diorama took first place. Now, that might have partially been because there were only 2 other entries, and everybody else who went to the club completely forgot that the event was happening. But you know what? A victory is a victory, and I'm going to take it. And I was feeling pretty good about my first win. But I wanted more. I wanted a greater challenge. I wanted to take this thing to a competition where I didn't know everybody, where there might be people who are way more skilled than me that exist out here in the Bay Area, and I just haven't met them yet. So I took them to the Silicon Valley Classic, and at that event, I entered my diorama into the small dioramas category. Now, there were actually a ton of different categories at this event, some covering scale model tanks, others scale model planes, ships, cars. There was a kids category. We had miniatures, so I totally could have brought some of my Warhammer characters, but did not, and I should have, because I probably could have won something with that, but I'll try that next time. So all I brought was my diorama. I entered it into the small dioramas category, which was packed. I genuinely was incredibly impressed with not just what was entered into the small dioramas category, but literally every category. All of them had so many different entries. There were tons of large dioramas, small dioramas, miniatures, a massive Gunpla section that had multiple categories within it, which was super cool to see because I genuinely don't know why Gunpla and scale modelers don't overlap more. The hobbies are so similar and you guys use so many of the same tools. So actually seeing this local event having such an emphasis on Gunpla just made my little weeb heart flutter with joy. But we need to talk about the diorama competition because that's what I entered into. And after a full day of waiting around to find out whether or not the judges liked my piece, I ended up placing 3rd in the small dioramas category. And oh my God, I genuinely was so excited when I actually heard my name called. I genuinely was not expecting this. The amount of exceptionally talented entries that were in the small diorama category, let alone everything else, blew my mind. And I honestly was not expecting my first project to even place. I was expecting to maybe be oh yeah, you did pretty well, but there were just some people who weathered better or painted better or just had a more interesting scene, etc. But no, they liked my piece and oh my God, I'm just so excited about it. And it's really encouraged me to want to try more. And in fact, while I was at the event, while I was waiting to find out whether or not I even placed with my diorama, which, oh my God, 3rd place, I still can't get over it. I'm just so pleased. I really want to get more. I actually really like the coins. I think that's a really fun way to give awards for these things. So I like that. I want to win more of these. And hopefully I will win more of them with my next diorama project. One that is, albeit a little bit more ambitious than this first small one. In fact, it's going to be significantly larger and will probably take me a little bit of time to put together because I have to learn a couple of new techniques with it too. But I wanted to take a moment to tell you about it a little bit before we wrap up today's video, because you see, while I was looking around, I found a B-29 Super Fortress. And you might be going, Angela, I didn't think you were super into planes. And normally I'm not. However, the B-29 is the one that's sunken into Lake Mead in Vegas. And it's represented in Fallout New Vegas. And this is a 144 scale model, which I think is going to go extremely well with my Modifius Fallout figures. And I actually want to do a scene where the Brotherhood of Steel is finding this bomber in the lake for the first time, do some water effects, make it all battle damaged and everything. It's gonna be so cool. It's probably gonna take me a while, but I am so pleased that I actually found this thing, because I have been looking for months, pretty much, actually it might have even been over a year, because like I've had this idea before I even drew up and conceived this one. This is something that I've wanted to do the second that I learned that there was that plane in Fallout New Vegas, that it was in fact a real crash, and that I could potentially do something with a real scale model kit of that exact plane. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching me put together my diorama, talking about how it did at the various events, and are even looking forward to future dioramas for me coming up, because I definitely want to do more. I'm definitely going to be entering in more competitions. In fact, there's gonna be one this November, so we'll probably revisit dioramas and everything about them in my journey with that process. Anyways, thank you guys so much for being here with me through this episode. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope you guys are encouraged to make your own dioramas. Maybe go to your own scale model events and just work on more miniatures. Before I head out, I want to give a huge thank you to not only my patrons, but also my YouTube members. Without your guys' support, we would not be able to do this, so thank you all so very, very much. I have been Angela, and I hope you all have a wonderful hobby night. Bye, everybody.